On today's episode, we're going to learn all about how you, as a real estate agent, have the ability to, of course, learn details about the market, learn details about what's happening in your industry. But one of the biggest missed opportunities is this: how to learn more about the people that you're serving, to really become emotionally intelligent, not just market intelligent. Today's guest is going to give us all the details on that. He's actually authored a book on this topic. He's sold over $2 billion worth of sales by mastering this one thing. It's going to be a great episode. Again, if you want to master how to work with buyers, how to work with people in general, this episode's for you. So while I'm without my lovely co-host today, I have an amazing guest, Mr. Scott Harris. Scott, let me just begin by saying welcome to the Think Bigger Real Estate Podcast.
Justin, thanks for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah, straight out of Manhattan, folks. He is going to be sharing some insights that are valuable. But first, let's get a little background on you. Again, as I mentioned before, you've sold $2 billion worth of real estate over 2 decades. You are the founder and brokerage owner of Magnetic in New York, which is a boutique brokerage. I love it. And the nationally best-selling author of a new book, The Pursuit of Home. Scott, again, such a pleasure to have you here. I think all of our guests who primarily are real estate agents, although many also tend to be those professionals who also serve property owners. So we're going to learn a lot today from you, I'm convinced, about how to really deepen our knowledge, our emotional intelligence. So let's just kick this off. How did you get into real estate? In fact, there's a little birdie told me that you actually have quite some accolades when it comes to singing. And can you tell us a little bit about your music career prior to your real estate career?
Sure. Well, first, let's just say that my career, as it laid out, as it was happening, no one would have said, "Oh, you're going to be, a great real estate agent." I started in the music business after college. I was putting bands on the road. I ended up putting my own band on the road, and we were traveling all around the country. But I was learning a bunch of skills about not just how to sell a difficult product, a band, like who wants to put a band into a bar or a concert hall or whatever, but also the people. How do you manage people on the road? How do you get people to come to decisions when it's not such a consequential decision like buying a home? And I made that move from Boston. I was living in Boston for about 6 years, performing and touring, and then I moved to New York. I was ready to get out of Boston. I wasn't from there, and it was time to make a move, and New York was always calling me. And my stepmom I was really struggling. What am I going to do next after this band? My mom had been the marketing director for a residential real estate brokerage in New Orleans. My dad was and still is, in commercial real estate in New Orleans. He's a landlord of a big warehouse. And my stepmom, who's not in real estate at all, was the one who said, Scott, I think you'd be a great real estate agent. It wasn't something I'd ever thought of. But then after looking back on it, it's like, wow, all these things that I had done before real estate really stacked up to make me into quite a real estate broker. It was really something. All of a sudden, I was really good at it right out of the gate. And I think a lot of that had to do with the way that I engage with people.
What's fascinating is that oftentimes we look back at the breadcrumbs of life and realize that we were being prepared for something really important, right? And at the time, in fact, my mom loves to share this message, is that sometimes when we're looking at life and the different paths that we take, sometimes it feels like, man, is this a little bit of a dead end, right? Or is this, how come I got moving down this career of music when that wasn't my end thing, right? And it's like this tapestry. All we see is the back end, kind of the knots and the snags, and all of a sudden we're brought around to the front and we see like, oh, all of that was preparing me to actually be really good at real estate. And you're like, real estate? What? So I love your story because again, for anybody that's along that journey and they're feeling like, man, I'm not quite sure this is as smooth as I had projected in high school when I thought I was just on upward trajectory to the right? It's like, if you look around and learn the lessons, you'll start to see clues that lead you to maybe the mission that you're supposed to be on, right? The things that you're supposed to be doing. So fun to hear your story in that. When you think back about your story, Scott, what part do you feel like has most prepared you? Like what were the lessons that you feel like most prepared you to be a different real estate agent, right? Different than maybe what's taught or what you see out in the marketplace.
One of the things that I think really separates me is my level of curiosity. I spent so many years touring the country, meeting people of all different walks of life, people in little tiny towns. We performed a lot of all ages shows, even at a lot of schools, met a lot of school teachers and just regular people. And through all of that, I discovered, there's something about everybody that you meet that is special, interesting. They have something about them. They have a story that's worth learning about. And I think that curiosity about people and what makes them tick, and frankly, how I can help them, not just in real estate, but just in general. I have a real like burning desire to help people. And real estate is the vehicle that seems to be the most lucrative, but I've always been a person that's wanted to help. And so it's about bringing people together. I listen to one person's story. Okay, they're looking for a job. I've helped people get their first jobs. I've helped people get their biggest clients. I've helped connect philanthropies to people who want to donate to them. So it's about making matches on a much bigger scale, thinking bigger, as you say, as you like to say. It's really about how do I make connections and help people move forward. And I think that's really what separates me more than anything, because I do realize that in doing that, it's come back in a zillion different ways. It certainly has helped me grow my business.
It's fascinating. It's almost like you're playing a bigger game than most people, right? I want people to consider this, that while they're polishing up maybe their listing presentation or their script on this or that, right? Scott's up here, step back at a higher level and saying, who's the human behind this home? Who's the human behind this? Who are they at the core? And what is it that they're looking to accomplish? And how can I connect them to that? How can I be a value add to their life? Which makes me, as the choice of real estate agent, obvious, right? It's like, while people are, again, quabbling over this and that and this little detail, it's like, step up, think bigger, and how can I move this person's life forward, right? Is that maybe a fair assessment of kind of how you go about doing things?
I mean, you put it beautifully. Maybe I was just so oblivious to the fact that most real estate agents on average, when I started, were making like $40,000 a year. In my band, I only made like 25. So I started in real estate. I had no preconceived notions. I just knew I liked helping people. And I always loved real estate. I thought I might be an architect when I was 9 years old, drawing pictures of brick houses. And I grew up in one of the most architecturally interesting places in the country. I grew up in New Orleans. So I was surrounded by real estate, and my parents, all the things they were doing. I just got into it wanting to help people. It was like, oh, I didn't think there was another way to do it. It's always been a people business for me. And of course, I'm sure we'll get into it, but there are table stakes. You have to get a certain level of knowledge and constantly be nurturing that. But the people in front of you are making ultimately an emotional decision. Everybody thinks, oh, this is a transaction. I think that's the mistake that a lot of people fall into. And the transaction layer is like the tiniest little layer on top. But the big bulk of what's going on is an emotional journey that you're, as an agent, that you're taking them on. And that's what I discovered over time. So that's a long answer to what you said, but yes, absolutely. Playing a bigger game about helping people.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I think for anyone who maybe feels the grind of real estate, like, man, these past couple of years have been hard, rates aren't cooperating, yada, yada, yada. I think while everyone's in that spot, I think where maybe real gratification can come and real meaning and purpose isn't by having another award that you put on your shelf of being the top producer this, top producer that, but it's how impactful can you be in the life of somebody, helping them get the job that turned into a career, right? That changed the trajectory of their family situation. Like all of a sudden it's like, wow, I thought I was just showing people houses. No, this is so much bigger, because you're connected to people on such a more intimate level when you're helping them find a home. You have to know, right, what's important to them in their life, what's happening, and what their goals are. All of those things allow you to play such an integral part if you, like you said, are curious enough and care enough, right? Those are two components that I caught from you. That you've got to be really curious, and then you've got to actually care enough, right? And the thing I love about the way you do business, Scott, is it's so transformational. It's not transactional. It's like, how can I help transform these people's lives? And I think when you come in with that mentality, right, business, I would imagine, and you can tell me after having sold $2 billion worth of it, that it starts to flow much easier than when you're just out looking for transactions. Is that a fair way to put that?
I mean, I'll tell you a story, okay? I got a call, right? Like it was the Friday after Thanksgiving, and these are good clients of mine and friends. And he's like, Scott, I need to talk to you. I'm like, what do we need to talk about right now? Well, it turns out he's been trying to sell a condo for his mom who went into an assisted living facility, and it's not selling. He's like, I don't know what's going on. Can you please help me? And of course, I'm not a real estate agent in Florida. I'm a real estate agent in Manhattan. But you know what I did? I have a really wonderful network. I said, does anybody know an agent in this area? I got a couple of numbers and I called them and I got some more information. It turns out they're mispriced. It could be a lot of different things. In this case, it's just a price issue. And so we got on the phone and I walked them through it. You know, because sometimes you can just approach it. How can I help this person? And there's no direct payoff. But you know what? Like, you're planting seeds for the rest of your career. And sometimes if you go in thinking, hey, I'm making deposits in the bank of the universe and the interest comes back from all different places, that kind of mindset serves you in such a bigger way. Because, sure, I'm getting a referral fee if I refer him an agent in this little town, and this is a $200,000 house or a condo. It's about service. And if you kind of look at it in a bigger way, then yeah, it ultimately, you're playing, like you said, it's just a much, much different game, a more fun game. You're adding value and you're doing something that you can't necessarily see tomorrow, but you know it in your gut. Hey, I just did something really good and helpful.
So good. I want to go back to this concept about people are really making an emotional decision. I shared with you something that I heard this past week that was fascinating. That when people have like a traumatic brain injury that impacts the portion of the brain that deals with emotion, where they really don't have that anymore, those people have almost an impossible time. Like, they really cannot make a decision. You could put all these great decisions in front of them and they can't, right? It's not because the logic part of their brain isn't working. They can identify like that one is logically better, but because they can't emotionally connect to that thing, they cannot make a decision, which is fascinating, right? Because again, we spend so much time trying to become more intelligent, right? And what you are really honing in on is that there's something actually much more important, which is becoming emotionally intelligent. Identifying what actually moves the heart, what makes people really care about something. And by doing that and impacting and adding value in that area, all of a sudden, you're able to help people make decisions. And I don't know, any thoughts on that? I know that was something that was interesting to both of us.
That study blew my mind, and it really just reinforces what I know, is that people take an emotional decision and then they dress it up in the language of transaction. They dress it up in the close of a transaction. They want to pretend like it's a transaction when it really is something else. I mean, I want to go back to my friend in Florida. He's struggling emotionally because his mom is far away from him. He lives in New York, and this is just weighing on him. It's not about whether the apartment sells for $225,000 or $190,000. That's not going to change his life dramatically. Having the peace of mind to know that somebody really has their interest at heart and can help him make this important move so that they don't have this apartment that's just sitting there vacant. It's not about the money. I mean, the end, yes, money plays a part, and an agent has to really know their business and their market. But if they forget the emotional piece, if that guy didn't think I cared about him and his mom and his family and what their goals were, he wouldn't have called me in the first place.
Yeah, you would have never even started the process, right?
That's right.
They might have chosen someone who was convenient online versus, right, somebody who can actually, again, is curious enough and cares enough to actually learn the situation, find out what really matters to people, and deliver that. Right? I think sometimes we are trained we're trained to be, or we're told what matters, right? Oh, what really matters is this component of a home, or this component of the price, or this component, right? Whereas we never stop to actually ask what people actually care about, right? What matters to them. We'd love to hear, again, you've written this incredible book. We'll be sure and put in the show notes a link to it, right? The Pursuit of Home. But what are some other either kind of paradigm shifts or strategies or even tactics that you employ in order to get to this more emotional level of serving clients?
Very first meeting, Justin, the very first point of contact, and anybody, any sales, Any sales training an agent ever goes through says, get the meeting, right? Get the meeting. Yes, absolutely get the meeting. But when you sit down at that meeting, the paths diverge. I talked to the guy, a guy who runs the Buffalo, New York Association of Realtors, a wonderful guy named John Leonardi. He says there are 152 steps one of my agents came up with to get from A to Z in a transaction. And we were going through the list. And you know what's not on the list? Sitting down with a person and learning what their goals are. And that's the most important thing, the most important. So what I
Me too.
recommend,
And not one was ask them what
right?
matters to them.
There's the emotional intelligence that's required to be a good agent, not an okay agent, not a good, but really a great agent, isn't even on the list. Go and look at all of the different checklists out there of what are the questions that you want to ask of a buyer. And it's like, how many rooms? What's your purchase price? Are you pre-approved for a mortgage? All important things. But if you put that stuff up front, it just makes everybody seize up and get defensive. Take the time, slow down, get tactical. And what that means is just sit and be present with the buyers in front of you and really learn like what their goals are. And I know we've kind of repeated this, but if you do this in the right order, everyone relaxes and they're more honest. And it actually, in slowing down, it speeds up the rest of the process because you get to tap into both your intuition and wisdom as a real estate agent, and the buyers get to relax and start to tune in to what's important to them. It works so much better. I had 2 situations recently, Justin, which doesn't always happen. One buyer comes to me and says, we want to spend $3.5 million, which in a lot of markets is a crazy budget. In New York, it's like my day-to-day often. And I said, okay, let's look at these things and we'll make sure you're looking at things up to say 4.5 or 5, because we just want to see what they are. We sat down, had a really good coffee meeting and talked to them. I shared my book with them. What are you looking? What are your goals? They're moving in from the suburbs. They bought the first property they saw. They felt so good. And we just listened and talked. And then 2 weeks later, we went out and looked at properties, and the very first thing they saw was perfect for them because we listened really, really carefully. And that kind of thing doesn't happen if all you're focused on is budget, because you miss all those little cues about what they said. What it turns out is the wife is all in on the city. The husband is kind of 1 foot in. He really likes the quiet of the suburbs, and they just sold their house, and he's kind of living in a loud apartment in New York. So what was flashing to me is he needs quiet. And we found a really beautiful apartment on a side street that might have been overlooked if we didn't really listen carefully at the start.
Fascinating to me of what you just shared there, of how much people are studying, probably trying to memorize those 152 points, right? And yet they're missing the component is that on the other side of this checklist is a human who in their own mind has thoughts and concerns and worries and fears and ambitions, right? And by simply stepping back to say, tell me about you, tell me about your story, tell me about, right? And I'd love to hear some even better questions than what I just posed there that get people to really start to open up to where they start to share what they're really feeling, to where you could guide them. Are there any that kind of your favorites, your go-to questions that really get people going down that path?
Well, first, to give the tiniest plug of my book, there's some free resources
Please.
online that are like a buyer checklist. Like, what are the things that you go in wanting to know? And it's the order that I think makes the most sense to have people open up. But if there's a go-to question that I think cuts through even the most transaction-minded, data-oriented people, it's this: what does home mean to you? It's hard to dance around that because somebody can say, oh, home. They can't say that home is a good deal. They can't say that. Yes, they want to get a good deal, sure. But home has to mean something to them. It's an individual answer. It could be a different answer for the people, if it's a couple, it could be a different answer for each of them. But a lot of the time the answer is somewhere around, it's where we raise our kids. It's where we, it means so much. Or it could be the community that's around them. There's no right answer, but that cuts through all of the noise. And usually what I like to say is you want to ask questions that provoke honesty, questions that kind of cut through the noise of and the fear of going and setting out to buy. When you ask questions that signal that you care about them, it's like a constant lowering of the temperature. We're in this together. I care about you. Let's figure out what you're about and what you're trying to do. Who are you today? Who do you want to become in the future? And how do we get you there? And that can look in a zillion different ways. But I think that question, what does home mean to you, ultimately has provoked in a thoughtful way, like some of the best answers that I get. I don't always ask it, Justin, but I certainly think that it's like, I was gonna use the metaphor of, of sex, that there should be some foreplay, but that's a terrible metaphor. What I actually think is that it's like dating. If you're constantly worried about what is this person thinking of you, it's like you're in your own head. As an agent, you just want to be with the other person and really getting to know them. And that sort of takes, you don't have to be the most brilliant real estate person. You don't have to know everything. You don't have anything to prove other than that you care. If you're on a team, you can really rely on your team to give you a lot of the information. But what you can't rely on them for is your heart and your caring and being in front of that person and being present. Look, for better or worse, 71% of home buyers choose the first agent that they meet. So if you get in the door, there's a pretty good chance you're going to win. But the way you make it better and have a better outcome is by caring first.
I want to hear we're going to hear quick from our sponsor, and then I want to have you share with us how much more relevant what you teach is in an AI world. So we'll be back here in 20 seconds. So again, we live in this AI world where people are able to gain access to be intelligent, right? Faster than ever before. This concept of emotional intelligence, while we might be able to ask ChatGPT, what would be a good question to ask, the reality is it can't do that for us. It has to be a human to human, right? So again, how much more relevant is what you're teaching in today's world, where you've got people who are equipped with all of the information in the world at their fingertips, but maybe they're missing this key component?
There's an underlying assumption in there, Justin, when people go online and search. Everyone thinks they can be an expert in real estate. It's not like being a doctor. It's not like being a lawyer. There's something, because we are swimming. It's like we're fish in the water and we don't even realize, okay, we're in water. Real estate is everywhere. Home is so omnipresent in our lives that we think we understand it. Going in and out of homes and everything else. So we want to become experts. The problem is you're trying to be an expert in the wrong thing. Becoming an expert in what you like that's what you want to find, what moves you. But becoming an expert in the transaction, when you go online and talk to AI, talk to ChatGPT, you can get a lot of information about things that are out there. You're not going to get as much information about what's in here. And that's the part that's the most important. What do you love in a home? And I will say this, and any agent out there who's sold more than one house, it will tell you that the checklist that buyers start with is usually not the checklist that they finish up with, because people don't know what they actually like. And so this process of learning all the things about the transaction, like, hey, hold my beer, I can figure this out on my own. It really is, you're kind of going down the wrong path, as opposed to, what are the things I really need to know here? And it's an inside game. And if you focus on that, look, you can spend some time with ChatGPT and say, ask me questions as if you were, a therapist, not a realtor, but a therapist, and start to do some unpacking of your issues. There are a lot of things you could unpack that are going to give you more in touch with yourself. That could be helpful for AI to do, but the actual real learning has to happen in the field, looking at properties, and seeing what your gut reaction is. This neck up reaction is like what you think you're going to like. But then I talk all about this in the book, but if you walk into a property that's supposed to check all the boxes, you're excited, you're a home buyer, you're like, yes, honey, let's go. This is going to be great. And you walk in and you feel nothing. That happens all the time. What's wrong? Well, what's wrong is that the checklist you thought that was right isn't right. And so there's something else there. There's something else to learn about what you actually are going to love. And it's the job of a real estate agent to watch the people looking at a home. Like, I'm looking at you, home buyer, while you're looking at a house. And if you do that right, then I can see what you're not saying. I can intuit what you actually like, what you're reacting to. And I can say to a home buyer, look, I'm watching you look at this thing, and I can tell you don't like it. You might be saying, oh, it's nice. You don't like it. Like, let's leave this house and let's talk about why you didn't like it. Does that make sense?
Really does. I heard an agent describe the other day. So there's nothing worse than being an agent in a house saying, okay, standing in the living room saying, okay, this is the living room, right? As if that's obvious. Like, what am I doing here? Right. And I think that agent misses the whole point, which is it's not about the living room. It's about the people in the living room. Do they feel like this is their living room? Does this feel like, is this where they feel like at home or not? Right. There's an endless amount of people watching, not just entertainment, but people watching education that comes as you read people, right? And try and help them. And the reality is they've never been in that living room before either. They don't know what they're experiencing. And some of them haven't bought a house ever, or it's been a while, to where they're still trying to interpret these emotions themselves. They aren't good at this either. It's not like they go buy a new house every day, right? Like, so this whole process, you're really guiding people through, which I know you have a background in psychology, right? So this is probably coming handy. Not that everybody here that's listening, you don't need to have a degree in psychology, but learning from someone who does and has mastered that into real estate can be helpful.
Yeah, it's one of these surprises that people take their class, they get licensed, and they think that it's like you go through the listings database and you pick a few and then off you go and somebody buys something. Whereas it's very much not making a match with the property as much as it's making a match with the people. So I want to give you one other thing, another example of what emotional intelligence looks like, Justin. As an agent, you are a person and you have your own default communication style. What is that style? Are you more data-driven? Are you more emotional naturally? Are you more focused on building consensus? We have a little assessment in the book that helps people understand their own communication style, whether they're an agent or a home buyer. As an agent, you have to sort of understand your own communication style, what its strengths are and what its weaknesses are, and then have to do a quick assessment of what the buyer's communication style is. Because if you're emotional and you're like operating of, well, this is a great neighborhood and, this is a great builder and blah, 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 you just give like the bullet points, that data-driven buyer that's in front of you loses trust in you because you're not giving them the data that they need. A data-driven buyer is going to take longer to make a decision than the emotional buyer. And there's no right way. But you know what? If you listen to the cues when you're in that first sit down, you quickly understand who's in front of me, what are their communication styles, and then how do I make sure I tailor my information I have to share to them. And odds are it's a couple, because more than 70% of buyers are couples. They're going to have different communication styles. So you have to find a way to establish your credibility as an agent, make sure they know you know what you're talking about, like throw in little breadcrumbs of confidence and information, but then deliver what you need to say with enough for that you're satisfying both people in front of you so they feel like you're listening to them. They feel seen and heard and understood.
What's fascinating too is that, and I'll give an example. Last night, my in-laws have been visiting for the holiday, and they had a question for me. I spent 2 years in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, and they were asking about the big Christ statue that stands up on the mountain. Like, how tall is it? I don't know. Right? I visited it, but I don't know how tall it is. So I opened up ChatGPT and I said, "Hey, chat," right? And it started and we just had this conversation. Their eyes are blown, like, whoa, right? This is crazy, right? And I think that more and more generations are going to get comfortable realizing that they can have the world's information at their fingertips, right? And if all you do is show up with data without actually connecting to them emotionally and helping them to interpret whatever data through their own life story, that you're going to be commoditized, right? To the point of a bot could do that, right? A robot could do that. And I think I love your emphasis on, again, creating this emotional intelligence and reading the people more than you're even reading the neighborhood. I think all that's important, right? Because some won't have it. And your, of course, on the ground experience will be much more valuable than that, especially if it interfaces with real life human stories that they can emotionally connect with, right? Is that maybe kind of how you see the future playing out of agents who go all in on just data without studying the emotional side of the transaction, which are the humans, are they're going to become more and more of a commodity?
The market's always changing. You need to know everything about your neighborhood that you cover, the towns you cover. People expect you to know that. You don't have to show it off. And worse comes to worse, sometimes you really know what you need to know 5 minutes before your meeting. It's not like you can know everything. It's impossible. Why try? I think you should just make sure that you know what you feel like you should know, and then have the confidence of that preparation that goes in. But being knowledgeable about the people in front of you is so much more important than being knowledgeable about every little thing. And I want to give a shout out to agents that aren't, out in my market, we have attorneys that do the contracts, and we have all these different specialists. I don't have to wear the hat of an attorney like so many agents. I don't have to deal with title insurance and all these other things. So, the people out there who become experts in so many things, I want to tip my hat to you. But that's the part that buyers really expect you just to take care of. They don't really, when you sit down after you get to know them a little bit, only then can you say, here's the timeline that you can expect. And you can start to set a little bit of expectations. And then guess what? You can kind of put that stuff to the side. The buyers are like, okay, I'm going to ask. I know that if I ask a lot of questions, that's okay. I know if I trust this person to just take care of it, that's okay too. Whatever the person's personality and what they need, it's fine. Then they can relax and just focus on the information they need to know, which is coming from inside. And you're just a guide kind of holding their hand or through that whole, which is a wild ride. And that's the part that is the hardest, Justin, is that home buyers today are expecting perfection because they go and look at social media and they go and look at beautiful people on real estate reality TV shows. What they're not seeing is what actually happens in real estate. So the expectation set is higher than ever. And so you are going in, you have to sort of recalibrate them really quickly. Hey, we're going to go into properties and some of them are going to be real duds. And guess what? That's not a waste of time. That's like a ton of learning that goes in, because you can spend some time saying all the things you hate, have some emotion about it and laugh about it. And ultimately, it's, again, to bring it back to your question about AI, let AI be AI, but it doesn't know what construction is happening near the property, what new exciting things are going to make the property more valuable, what schools are good, which ones are getting worse, which ones are getting better. All of this inside scoop that you only learn by being a person. So like lean into being a person, and you have this, the world's information in your pocket. And you can even say like, oh, I don't remember what the last thing this builder built, but we can look it up. Like, the things I'm good at are the things you're not going to get here on this. I'm holding my hand up, pretending it's a phone.
Well, what's interesting to me, again, on this topic of connecting with people emotionally, right? Again, as you mentioned, you've got the world's information in your pocket. Literally, there's no more barrier to entry to having all the knowledge that's out there. It's immediate, right? And yet, when you couple that with this deep understanding of how you're describing to connect with people, what happens is you take people on a journey that probably they've never been on in any situation. Most spouses are not good at asking questions to find out what their spouse really wants. Right. Like, that's the reality, is that you're actually leading people to a place they've never been before. And the trust that you get from people when you stop and ask questions that, by the way, they aren't sitting around thinking about answers to these things. They've got emotions and concerns. It's all kind of jumbled up into how they feel that day, right? But until somebody helps them to actually articulate that back to say, oh, this is why I'm feeling excited. This is why I'm feeling nervous. This is why I'm feeling, anxious. And this is what I really want. And here's why I want it. And I never knew that until somebody asked me the question. Like, it's such a beautiful process of helping people to actually not just you discover them, but for them to discover them, right? To them discover what they actually want in life.
Yeah, I think people and agents certainly make this mistake, but buyers do too, in thinking that all we do as real estate agents is like show properties, negotiate, that it's this like bloodless thing. But the truth is that we wear our transaction hat like 5% of the time. And the rest of the time, we're therapists, we're cheerleaders, we're coaches, we're priests and rabbis and all of these other things. And all of those are emotional hats. It's like such a tiny percentage of the time are we really working with the buyers on the business piece. And the rest of the time, we're navigating the transition that people are going through. And if we, really think about it in that percentage of time, then you're like, wow, I'm really focused on the wrong stuff. And that's okay. I think in the beginning, I don't want to pretend like I figured this out from minute one. I mean, I made a ton of mistakes. And in New York, I started as a rental agent, which is something that you can probably only do in major metropolitan areas. I was getting commission. Like I said, I probably made $25,000 a year before I got into real estate. And my first real estate year, I did $100,000. And it was because I was hustling 7 days a week, renting apartments. But at the end of that year, I looked back and I'm like, God, this is such a hustle. It's just transactional. And it felt so empty. It felt like, what am I doing? And as soon as I had that epiphany, wait a minute, these are people in front of me. And my first client was this little old Italian lady who had gotten divorced, and she just wanted a place with a nice open view. And we looked at like 50 apartments, and she finally found something that she loved. And like, she was just so over the moon excited about it. And it was so satisfying, even though it was like one of the smallest transactions I've ever done. I think it was a $220,000 transaction in New York. You can't buy a parking spot for that now, right? And it was such a stark difference between the transactional feeling of being the rental agent and the powerful emotional feeling of helping somebody. It was like night and day. And that really is what charged me up and was like, oh, this actually is something, I think we're up to something really important here. And fast forward 20 years, I go as far as saying that what we do is sacred, that we have like a real sacred responsibility with what we're doing in people's lives. And so people who feel like they're, if they've treated this like just a transaction in their business, they're missing out on so much more.
Yeah, not just income, but just pure purpose, right?
Purpose.
Like that story of a lady who was, starting over, and you were able to give her a place that she could feel safe and at home when home had been taken from her, right? It had been changed entirely. Like how satisfying can that be? I would just encourage everybody that's listening here today to get a copy of Scott's book. PursueYourHome.com is where you should go. I'm going to flash up here on the screen for those that are watching the recording. You'll see that there's actually some free resources. For those that are just listening to the podcast, it's that, again, PursueYourHome.com/free-resources will give you even more of a starter kit to get going on this. And from there, I'm sure you'll have additional ways to stay connected to Scott. But let's just give it to him, Scott. What's the best way for them to follow? Can they follow you on social media? What's the best way to stay in contact with you outside of your resources?
I happen to have a copy of the book here, so I'll show
you. Oh, look at that
picture.
I like it.
It's a happy, inviting door, and I call it The Pursuit of Home, a real estate guide to achieving the American dream, which is a very aspirational title. And I originally wrote it for first-time home buyers. But what I realized quickly as I was interviewing so many real estate agents about how they do it, great real estate agents from all over the US, I started to realize, wait a minute, this is an opportunity for real estate agents to get into the heads and hearts of home buyers everywhere. What are they actually going through? And I talk about it all the time on social media. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's Scotty Harris, Scottie Harris. And yes, they can go to pursueyourhome.com and they can get all the free resources. It's actually Scottie.
Oh,
Y, as some people spell it. But
IE, got it.
And then if they're, if these are real estate agents, they're on LinkedIn, they can follow me at Harris Residential. And I talk all the time about the emotional decisions that people make, the mistakes that people make out of emotion, out of how they sabotage themselves. We didn't even get into that. That's quite a whole chapter I dedicate to all the ways that home buyers get in their own way. So, I mean, those are really, between the book website and those two, that's the best way people can stay in touch.
I love it, Scott. Boy, you've really opened our eyes to what the meaningful work that real estate agents are engaged in, right? And I would say this, again, because of my work with ProInsight, we unite the professions who serve property owners together to create what we call a complete real estate resource. And so I know many of our audience are not real estate agents, and I would say that these principles apply, especially, you think of the asset-based professionals like financial advisors and tax professionals, estate attorneys. Like, you're still dealing with humans on the other side. Even, the vetted contractor professionals, you're still dealing with people's homes, right? There's people. Anytime you're dealing with people, these principles apply. So this is not just a real estate agent conversation. It's really for anybody who serves humans, which I would say is most people, right? And what a way to bring more purpose and meaning and just a higher level of service, as we mentioned before, just playing a higher game. So, Scott, can't thank you enough for coming on to the Think Bigger Real Estate podcast today. It's been such a pleasure. I feel like I've got a new friend in the city, and I'm happy that our paths have crossed and that I get a chance to share you with the Think Bigger Real Estate audience.
Thanks for being here. It's really a fun conversation.
Yeah, likewise. And to all of our loyal fans listening here today, I have one final request of you, which are 3 simple words. You know what they are, and they are: go, think bigger. And Scott, you taught us how to play a bigger game today. So thanks again. And it's supposed to be playing our outro. So thanks, everybody. We'll just end it there. Thanks, everybody. Talk soon.